from across the region. I'll also be asking whether the Angela Rayner comeback has already begun and what this new NHS online service really offers us. I'll be looking at the Michelle Mone fine, the sentencing of a Rochdale grooming gang leader and, oh yes, the complete shutdown of the US government. A few things to chew over? Well, I think so. Join me after the news.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 6 o'clock, the Chancellor says the government will work tirelessly to recover the money from a firm linked to Baroness Mone, which breached a PPE contract. PPE MedPro has been ordered to repay more than £120 million after supplying surgical gowns during the pandemic, which were found to be faulty. 7 men have been sentenced to more than 170 years in jail for their part in a grooming gang that abused girls in Rochdale. The group's ringleader, 65-year-old Mohammed Zahid, has been jailed for 35 years. The head of the Metropolitan Police, Mark Rowley, has apologised for what he's calling the reprehensible behaviour of some of his staff. An investigation has been opened into the behaviour of 11 people working out of Charing Cross Police Station in London. Allegations of excessive use of force and misogyny are being looked into. So Mark Rowley will be speaking live with LBC's Nick Ferrari at breakfast from 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. Reform UK has accused Sir Keir Starmer of inciting violence against Nigel Farage in his speech to the Labour Party conference. Sir Keir's denied the accusation that he risked inflaming tensions with his address yesterday. And the British Medical Association says it's formally in dispute with the government over today's introduction of an online booking system at GPs in England. The BMA claims the changes could overwhelm the system. In the city, the FTSE 100 closed up 96 points at 94.46. The pound buys $1.34 and €1.14. LBC weather, a dry evening for many, but rain lingering for northern England, Scotland and Northern Ireland. Lows of 6 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Dominic Ellis.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. It's 6 p.m. Now, Tonight with Andrew Marr.
Good evening. One of the big stories earlier in the week was the new Donald Trump peace plan for Gaza. I say one of, and I say big. But if this really happens, then for once I agree with Trump. It's immense. It's historic. But big if. Imagine an end to the slaughter. Imagine Palestinians being able to bring up their own children without fear, with clean water, edible food and adequate medicine. Imagine Israelis no longer believing that their country, their culture, was about to be overwhelmed and crushed. Sitting in a news bubble from which I so often bring you grim news, I am not prepared to let this possibility disappear from the headlines and the airwaves. Here at LBC, I hope and I believe we are going to stick with the peacemakers. But at the same time, let us not pretend this won't be hugely difficult. You may remember our newly minted Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper making exactly that point on yesterday's show.
We strongly support the US initiative to get an end to the war and suffering in Gaza. We need a ceasefire, we need the hostages released and also the restoration of humanitarian aid. But this is only going to be possible if we've also got a proper plan for a just and lasting peace. So we've put forward proposals, Arab states have been putting forward proposals, we've been working with other countries all through the summer and certainly at the UN General Assembly last week. A lot of that work underway, and it's crucial, I think, that this plan is now supported and developed. A lot of work to do on it still, but this is a really important moment.
So, in a mood of realism, not being naive or over-optimistic, let's test a bit of this. I'm joined first tonight by Fiona Hill, a former director of the US National Security Council under Donald Trump in his first term and a long-time foreign affairs expert. She's now the Chancellor of Durham University. As somebody who worked directly with Trump, I asked, does she have any optimism that he might be able to get this deal through?
Well, look, I think as we've all seen over the time since he came into office, He's in search of something where he can have a major breakthrough. He's already been engaged, obviously, on peace in Ukraine. He's engaged with the Iranians. He's talked about the possibility of reinvigorating something with North Korea. Again, as well, there's been hints of that, for example. And in the particular instance of the Middle East, we've already seen him make a very serious push. But the problem is one of consistency and who else is working with him and what is the framework. And are all the parties on the same page? And how is he going to manage all of that? So I think that the whole point here is that we have to watch very closely, and you have to make sure that there is a framework around this, and that it's not just going to get diverted by any time he thinks that there's going to be some kind of easy win, because all of these things take a lot of patience. They're all extraordinarily difficult. And the Middle East, of course, is one of the most difficult issues of it all to resolve in any fashion.
Patience, concentration and detail are not necessarily Donald Trump's top qualities, I think it's fair to say. But he has got a large coalition now of Arab countries. He's got the goodwill of the European countries. He's got Tony Blair there. And, of course, he himself is hoping to do this. Therefore, it seems to me that a lot of this is about how Hamas respond, but also his own relationship, Donald Trump's own relationship with Benjamin Netanyahu.
I think that's spot on, and he has to make sure that he's got equal leverage with both of them, and that's often where things have foundered. Because if you look in the case of Ukraine and Russia, he had leverage over Ukraine, obviously rather punitive leverage that he kept exerting over Volodymyr Zelensky and, withholding weapons, for example. And over Putin, although he had leverage, he didn't want to use it. And then that might again become the case with Israel and with Netanyahu. He's got all kinds of punitive leverage with Hamas, of course, but with Israel, leverage is there, but will he use it? And how will he then interact with this very complex constellation of other players?
Indeed. I mean, he put a lot of stress on his own personal relationship, almost his friendship with Vladimir Putin when he first came in. And clearly, bit by bit, he has been disillusioned and disappointed and indeed embarrassed by what's happened and the way that Putin has played things. And I assume that that is part of his own thinking now as he looks at Netanyahu, another leader with whom he thought he had a better relationship than it perhaps turns out he does have.
Yeah, he thinks everything comes down to very personal issues and, that charismatic bond between great men. But ultimately, there's a great deal of deep history here. Trump doesn't live in history, but Putin and Netanyahu absolutely do, and so frankly do Hamas in the case of the Middle East. In this case, they live in millennia of history, which I don't think President Trump fully grasps. So the personal relationships may only go so far. And again, the leverage is very complex. It's how he really wields it. But again, unfortunately, he's going to have patience. And as he's really kind of pushing towards goals in which he gets recognition from having resolved all kinds of wars, he made that crystal clear at the United Nations that he's gunning for nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize. That is really not the kind of objective you want to lay out for yourself for these kinds of problems that really have massive knock-on effects all the way around the globe.
That is so interesting. So it's really the real estate guy with a bottomless optimism meets history.
Yes, I think that is the case. And, in the case of real estate, maybe there's a limited history, to some kinds of the buildings that he might have been engaged with. But this is one of these preservation orders, one of these extraordinarily, complex sites where there's masses of regulation and there's all kinds of other players and multiple liens on the property. And that's the kind of complexity that he's dealing with.
In the new administration, do you think he is surrounded by enough expertise and enough kind of steely determination to start to put the kind of pressure on Israel that's going to be necessary?
I think that's a question in both instances. He's certainly got the ability to put pressure. In some respects, he's got the determination. He's expressed this. I don't know how steely it's going to be, but there's also a lot of pressure that he's going to have from different constituencies within the United States as well, and in the people around him. Once you personalise this, once you're looking this towards your own electorate, for example, that also becomes complicated. You create all kinds of constraints. And in terms of the expertise, of course, there are lots of people with expertise in the United States and elsewhere. But will he work with them is another matter, because he's famously said he doesn't care about experts. He thinks it's, again, all about two guys or three or four guys all meeting together, and that it's all, then a transaction. And, if he did pay attention to some of the experts beyond the people, that he sends off that have, some general superficial experience in things, obviously they might be able to tell him about some of the pitfalls. I'm just not sure that he's going to, listen to them. He might listen to Tony Blair. He might listen to some of the Arab leaders if he sees them as peers and counterparts. But he's not necessarily going to listen to members of his own staff.
Well, as a former member of his own staff and somebody whose deep expertise was obviously with Russia, have you got any advice for people advising him now? In other words, what did you learn about the way he would receive information, and how did you adapt yourself to that?
Well, he wouldn't listen to me, that for sure. I mean, that was I in his view, right? So that's the first message. But I think most people have actually got that. And you have to think who the messenger is, not just how you shape the message. So, in many instances, we actually had to ask and approach other world leaders or people at a very high status. Or people who we'd pay attention to for a variety of different reasons, that fit in with his own worldview, to ask them to convey the key messages that he needed to hear. So I would say that it's going to be, the Gulf leaders. It's going to be people who, like Tony Blair, have been prime minister, of major countries, or, others who have been involved in all of this. And it's going to be people who are very close to him. But again, you've got to figure out how to package that information in ways that he will understand and try to get across that isn't just a real estate transaction. And a lot of this is, again, you're dealing with a way of mediating through all kinds of complex interests as well as a weight of history. Yeah. And not everybody can bring to the table all of their people. I mean, Hamas is now at this stage a very amorphous organization. In the case of Ukraine, despite the fact of having Volodymyr Zelensky on top, Ukrainians are notoriously horizontal as a society. Not everything is a kind of a vertical of power in the way that Trump would like to deal with.
And again, that's a really interesting insight into what might go wrong here. You mentioned Tony Blair there. What do you think his real attitude is to Tony Blair? You called him great guy or good guy or something yesterday, but it was pretty terse.
Yeah, I don't think he knows him all that well. Tony Blair obviously is a famously charismatic and charming individual. He'll have to turn all of that on in dealing with President Trump. I think he's used to dealing with difficult people. Yeah. He obviously knows a lot about the region. He's had his own ups and downs there. I mean, it wasn't a great move that he made in terms of supporting intervention in Iraq. I think he's learned a lot from all of that. But I mean, he obviously has spent a lot of time now investing in understanding the region and working with people, and he knows all of the different players. And, he knows all of the different business angles to this as well. So, he is well positioned. It's just a question of whether he can find that relationship with Trump that will endure.
Wise words. Fiona, since we have you here, I must ask you about what's going on between the West and Russia at the moment. We've had President Macron effectively saying we are quite close to war with Russia. He thinks we are now in a situation of confrontation with Russia. What is your reading of the recent sort of Russian aerial probes and the drones and the rest of it? What do you think Putin is up to?
Well, Putin definitely intends to rock everybody back on their heels. He wants to create disunity, discord, fear in particular, intimidation. We've been in a confrontation with Russia ever since they annexed Crimea. And, probably for a good period of time around that, in terms of at least confrontational rhetoric coming from the part of Russia. Of course, we've had all kinds of incidents of sabotage, poisonings, assassinations, including in the United Kingdom. Putin has been playing by his own set of pretty ruthless rules for an extraordinary long time. And I think the sad fact is people are just waking up to this. And we should have been actually doing something to address this for quite some time. This is a moment now for European solidarity. It's a moment for Europe writ large, as much as it can, to get together to push back. And, you have to basically try to halt these kinds of activities in their tracks. He's doing it because he thinks we're weak. He thinks we're not unified. And he sees a great opportunity to pit everyone against each other. He doesn't see the United States as being particularly focused. And indeed, Putin now sees that Trump has moved on to the Middle East, where Putin can make mischief too, by the way. I mean, he's also a factor in the Middle East. So we've really got to get our act together in dealing with this and be very serious about how we assess what's happening.
Fiona Hill, thank you very much indeed for talking to LBC today.
Thank you, Andrew.
So now let's hear from Afif Safieh, the former delegate of the Palestinian Authority in the UK and indeed Washington, D.C. Afif, thank you very much for coming in. So far, the Palestinians are not represented in this process at all. How can it possibly work?
Mr. Marr, allow me to introduce myself slightly longer. I've been a major dialoguer on behalf of the PLO with Israeli circles and Jewish circles from the 80s onwards, while we were negotiating pre-negotiations and negotiating pre-negotiations, etc. Today, I cannot but express my disappointment at what happened in Washington. First of all, I think President Trump is no gentleman. The document he presented in his press conference is different from the document he discussed with the Arab and Muslim leaders in New York.
Really?
Because it was changed drastically during the weekend in discussions between Mr. Witkoff and Kushner with Netanyahu. So he's no gentleman. It doesn't happen that way, diplomacy. It's based on trust. Number two, sir, I was hoping a lot from that press conference, and I am a peace enthusiast. I was involved in PLO politics very dynamically when we moved beyond the dialogue of arms towards adopting the arms of dialogue, beyond double negation towards mutual recognition. We became unreasonably reasonable, not asking for absolute justice, but for possible justice. In spite of that, I have to express my disappointment. Why? At no moment did he feel the need to express empathy and sympathy for the Palestinian people. And I believe, sir, we are not children of a lesser God.
I understand.
In Gaza, we are 2.2 million people, and he would have been well inspired to express sympathy.
Can I ask you,
Please,
you represented the PLO, and in those days, PLO, Yasser Arafat, there was a clear leadership for the Palestinian people. Now we have Hamas, with whom the Israelis, for obvious reasons, will not speak or deal at all directly.
Yeah, but there is
we have the Palestinian Authority. So my question is, without Hamas being involved in any way, can there be a peace agreement?
I believe that the PLO and the PA should be associated and involved in any discussion for the future, and they'll be a very constructive player, by the way. And let me tell you my belief. Hamas will be today well advised, in spite of this document, which I believe is a disgrace of diplomacy. Hamas will be well advised to liberate the hostages they have, so as to remove any pretext for Mr. Netanyahu to continue with his slaughter, his indiscriminate bombardment, and even Israel.
That would be the humane and the intelligent move.
That's it. And I personally believe that Israeli circles will tell you that over 83% of the fatalities and the casualties are civilians in Gaza. Civilians, over 83%. So if I were Hamas, I would liberate immediately the hostages we detain, so that Netanyahu, we deprive him of any possible pretext to continue his slaughter. And I believe there should be another negotiation with President Trump, with the Arab and Muslim leaders who took part in the New York meeting, in addition to the PLO and the PA. And I believe here Trump was very badly advised when he removed the visa possibility for the PLO participation in the UN General Assembly.
You need to get everybody around the table.
Sir,
I understand that.
There is an agreement between the USA and the UN going back to the early 50s that any country involved in UN working can have access to New York and to the headquarters of the United Nations, even if the Americans don't have diplomatic relations with them.
Now, Mr. Safieh, you said country there. Of course, this country has just recognized Palestinian state. But in his response to the Trump peace plan, Mr. Netanyahu said absolutely no question of a Palestinian state, no question of a two-state solution. So presumably your view is that the other thing that Trump has to do is put far more pressure on Netanyahu and his government.
Sir, let me tell you, it seems to me that Mr. Trump is unaware of the changes that have occurred within American society itself. Not only a majority of the Democratic supporters in America, but also a significant minority within the Republican Party are unhappy at the conduct of American foreign policy in the Middle East. American foreign policy in the Middle East today seems and looks like a subcontract in the Israeli strategy. And many start to believe that Trump speaks of let's make America great again, but in that case, it's the tail that is wagging the dog and not the dog wagging the tail. Everybody expected Netanyahu to be pressured by Trump. On the contrary, what Trump did was adopt the Netanyahu approach. And let me tell you, in international relations, Mr. Marr, deterrence is a legitimate policy. What is deterrence? It's to dissuade a neighbor of undertaking a policy detrimental to my national interests. Yeah. The strategy of Netanyahu is compellence, how to compel and coerce your neighborhood into policies that are
I understand. Well, listen, one thing we do on this show is always try to bring people who know what they're talking about, and we've certainly done it tonight. Mr. Afif Safieh, thank you very much indeed for joining me.
Thank you, sir.
Coming up, a once celebrated British businesswoman has been ordered to pay millions of pounds for dubious PPE contracts during the pandemic. I'll be speaking to a doctor who dealt with the fallout of unusable COVID gowns. But the time now, 6:19.
Weekdays from 7 a.m.
Why this staggering level of incompetence?
Straight to the point.
This is the economics of the madhouse from this government.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
But she does seem to struggle with her sums.
Listen on Global Player or the new LBC app. Download it now from your app store. LBC. Tonight with Andrew Marr. Watch live on both Global Player and the new LBC app.
6:21. Now, this year's Labour conference also saw the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, insist that the country would get its money back after dodgy PPE contracts during COVID. And with neat timing, a High Court judge has ruled today that a company linked to the Tory peer Michelle Mone must repay £122 million for breaching a contract. Let's speak now to Dr. Rachel Clarke, an NHS palliative care doctor and author of Breathtaking, the UK's human story of COVID. Rachel, great to have you on the show again. Presumably you are very pleased with what the judge has done. Can I ask you to explain to people listening what it was like being on the wards when the gowns were faulty?
Yes, it was absolutely horrendous, Andrew. We had some of our PPE was so unfit for purpose, it beggars belief. You would take gowns, and as you tried to pull them off the roll, they would disintegrate in your hands. You'd have masks, and when you tried to put the ear loops over your ears, they'd ping off onto the floor. This was sort of plastic that was almost as flimsy as cling film. It was appalling. And while we were being issued with this type of PPE, we literally had nurses, doctors, porters in our hospital intensive care units dying of the COVID that surrounded the patients and the wards that we were going on to try and help patients. And I think the thing that is most sickening for me and NHS staff about the sorry saga of Michelle Mone and all the people who sought to get rich from the VIP lane for PPE, it's that while we were stepping up and trying to do our best for patients, And millions of Britons up and down the country were stepping up and being brave and dignified and decent for the sake of the country. There was this tiny minority of utterly avaricious, greedy scumbags who were trying to get rich quick from a pandemic. And they sickened me then, and they sicken me now.
Well, I'm sure Baroness Moan would deny some of that. But let me ask you, as you were dealing with the deeply sick and the dying around you in that situation, were you talking to one another thinking something deeply wrong has gone wrong with the political system, with the system of procurement? There is the stench of corruption.
Yes, very much so. And I vividly remember at the time two things that alarmed all of us in the NHS. So one was the fact that there were public appeals for PPE, for ventilators, and there were companies in Britain, British manufacturers who made PPE, had a track record of doing it, who were saying publicly, use us, we've got the track record, we can do this. And yet mysteriously, the hundreds of millions of pounds of contracts were going into the hands of individuals through the VIP lane. And the other thing that was soul destroying was the fact that when we were seeing colleagues unprotected, risking their lives, and you'll vividly remember, I have no doubt, Andrew, there were nurses having to use bin bags because they didn't have any protection. We had the then Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, standing up in front of the television cameras saying there are absolutely no national problems with PPE, and that was just a complete lie. I remember it very vividly. Dr. Rachel Clarke, even after this long time, it remains an absolutely shocking story. Thank you very much indeed for talking to me. Now, one of the most talked about names at the Labour conference in Liverpool wasn't even there. And no, I'm not talking about Andy Burnham, but the former Deputy Prime Minister forced to resign, Angela Rayner. She's taking a break, but Labour people still regard her as their serious star. Here's a taste from senior ministers yesterday.
I said when Ange stepped down that she had been a major voice in the Labour movement and that she would be a major voice for many years to come. I was personally very sad to see her go, Nick. If you talk about social mobility, there is no greater story than Angela Rayner.
As the care worker who became our country's Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, this achievement is yours. Thank you. And we want her back as well.
I'd like to see her back in time. She's a working class hero. She will always be a working class hero. And like John Prescott, plays a big role in the Labour movement.
So how long should her exile be, and how should the Prime Minister be handling the politics of this? Let's get the thoughts of our political correspondent, Aggie Chambre. Aggie, that was, of course, David Lammy at the end there talking to me yesterday. They all want her back. They all recognise what an asset she is. But they must be aware also of the public feeling that she broke the rules, she was sacked. You can't just bring her straight back.
No, indeed. And let's not forget, it was 3.5 weeks ago. It was the 5th of September that she resigned. And I don't know about you, Andrew. I don't think I was expecting Cabinet Minister after Prime Minister to be talking about Angela Rayner, to be praising Angela Rayner. But they were. And I think that question of how long should her exile be and how would it look like were she to return is a really, really interesting one. And I think, having spoken to people in government, they think maybe by the end of this Parliament, not soon. I don't think anyone thinks soon. And they think the way it would have to work, the way it would have to be choreographed is she would sit on the back benches for a while. She wouldn't speak in debates. Then she would start some campaigns on the back benches. She'd do a big sit-down interview where she would explain everything. Because let's not forget, we don't know exactly how everything happened at this stage. And then potentially, then she could come back. And also, could there be a book? I've asked that question. They haven't replied on that.
All right, Aggie, absolutely fascinating, as it always is. I'm joined now by Justin Madders, who was one of Angela Rayner's close former ministerial colleagues, removed himself in the reshuffle triggered by her departure. Justin, great to have you on the show. You must have felt your heart warmed a little bit by all the things that were said about Angela Rayner during the Labour conference.
Yeah, I think colleagues have been very kind about her contribution, and I think they're right that at some point she will be able to have an important role in the Labour Party and hopefully the Labour government of the future. She's had a really tough time. She was, hounded by the press, and she had to resign, understandably. So I'm sure at the moment she wants a little bit of time away to reflect and nurse her wounds. But when she's ready, she can do an awful lot of good for us.
I mean, she clearly made a serious mistake, and that's why she went.
Yeah.
And the public wouldn't want her to come back yet. But do you see her in due course? I mean, she was always one of the more, as it were, soft left voices in the party. That's a part of the movement that doesn't feel totally represented at the moment. Do you see her coming back and having a big, important influence on the direction of the party, the direction of the government?
Yeah, I hope so. I think, there's been plenty of examples of people who have had to resign and have come back in the future. And it's about timing, and it's about people being seen to have served their penance. I think at the moment there is obviously a bit of concern about the direction of the party, about the lack of distinct voices in government positions. We are a broad movement. We are at our best when we take on board views from across the wider party and movement. And I think Angela Rayner would have a really big role in that when it's right for her.
Well, Andy Burnham didn't have a good conference, I think it's fair to say, but a lot of the things he was saying about public ownership, taxation, redistribution and so forth remained very, very popular inside the party. One day, do you think Angela Rayner could come all the way back and be a future Prime Minister?
Oh gosh, well, I think we're rather planning out her entire life, aren't we, at the moment?
I'm jumping a few hurdles there, but I thought I'd ask.
Yes, and obviously, the talk about Andy Burnham being Prime Minister, there are a few hurdles there because he's not even an MP. So I know people like to sort of speculate on these things, but I do think we need to give Angela a bit of time and space to reflect on what she wants to do, because she may not want to do that. But I think we'd all be much happier if she did have an active role in the party in the future, because she's got so much to give. We've obviously got an important deputy leadership contest at the moment, and I'm backing Lucy Powell because I believe that she will be able to bring more broad voices into the debate and into the party. And Angela, I'm sure, will have a big role in that if that's what she wants to do as well.
Absolutely fascinating, Justin Madders. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. Now, Aggie is still with me. I said Maggie for a moment. Aggie is still with me. And you've got some recent new intel on the deputy leadership race, I think.
A bit of a row, Andrew. So I sat in the hall for the hustings between the two deputy leadership candidates, Lucy Powell and Bridget Phillipson. And they were both pretty critical of the government, only a bit in Lucy Powell more than Bridget. But it was the final closing remarks, I think, were notable. And that's when Bridget Phillipson said that electing Lucy Powell as deputy leader would be to choose division and disunity that fills the pages of the right-wing papers. So that was quite a stark comment. Lucy Powell has described that as unwise, but it seems like Bridget Phillipson, or at least allies of hers, are sort of doubling down on that, and they say the choice is clear in this election, and they make no apology for pointing that out, and the members need to know this is not a choice without consequences. So a bit of a row between the deputy leadership contenders.
Pretty
it seems
spicy, and we still don't have any real indication of who's ahead. We have lots of rumours, but nothing hard.
There's been YouGov polling of the Labour members, and there's been kind of surveys previously, which people say is not real polling. The YouGov polling basically said that Lucy Powell's ahead, but not actually by a huge amount. So this could really go either way. We've got 3 weeks left, Andrew.
We do like a close race. Aggie, thank you very much indeed. Now, up next, we'll return to our top story this evening as the world waits for Hamas's response to Trump's Gaza peace deal. I'll be speaking to a former advisor and peace negotiator to several Israeli prime ministers. But the time now, 6:32, and Dominic Ellis has your news headlines.
The head of the Metropolitan Police, Sir Mark Rowley, has apologised for what he's called the reprehensible behaviour of some of his officers. Allegations of racism, misogyny and excessive force at Charing Cross Police Station in London are being investigated. Ministers are welcoming a ruling that found a company linked to the Tory peer Baroness Mone breached a pandemic contract. PPE MedPro has been ordered to repay more than $120 million by a High Court judge. And the British Medical Association says it's considering taking industrial action confusion over the introduction of an online booking system at GPs in England. The BMA claims the changes from today could overwhelm the system. LBC weather, a dry evening for many, but rain will linger for northern England, Scotland and Northern Ireland. Lows of 6 degrees.
This is LBC. Tonight with Andrew Marr. Listen on your smart speaker. Just say, play LBC.
6:35. Let's go back to our main story tonight, and it's a question as much as a story. Is the great American Middle East peace plan for real? Or is it a Donald Trump fantasy? Now, Daniel Levy is a very experienced British-Israeli negotiator and commentator. I spoke to him a little earlier on, and he gave me his frank and, frankly, quite bleak assessment. He dealt with a united Palestinian Authority during his time as a peace negotiator. I asked, did he think there was a unified Palestinian side to talk to now?
Palestinians have been excluded from this. This was negotiated by President Trump with the Israelis, presented to 8 Arab and Muslim majority states, not presented to a Palestinian leader. It's like imagining the Europeans had gone to see Trump after the Alaska meeting with Putin and not taken Zelensky with them. You don't have a Palestinian in the room. And even the revisions, the necessary shifts to that paper presented by the 8 Arab and Muslim majority states who Trump met with, those were all totally ignored. So the paper, after the Arab input, which one imagines had some Palestinian input on the side, the paper actually moved further in Israel's direction. So it seems that the intention is not to have Palestinian interlocutors. So the question, unfortunately, becomes a bit moot. It's the right question to ask, but it's only when the people putting the paper together want that Palestinian input. And let's be clear about what Prime Minister Netanyahu has said. It's one of his conditions. His condition is no Hamas, no PA, no recognized Palestinian address. He explicitly says there can be no Palestinian ownership. And therefore, what you've got on the table looks a lot more like, especially in its economic component and governance component, some kind of colonial construct. It reads like a charter for a new Dutch East India Company to me, Andrew.
So you have this new peace body, whatever it's called, with people like Tony Blair, European representatives on it, maybe Arab state representatives on it, Americans, but no Palestinians. The question is, how do the Palestinians react if 6 months in they don't like what it's doing?
I'm going to be honest with you. I cannot see this getting anywhere near to implementation 6 months in or at any time. So I would cross that bridge when we get to it. But I think the first thing is to say, and this is what the Arab parties, again, said in their revisions. I'm not saying they come to this having used all the leverage they can and they faithfully represent a Palestinian position. But I think what they've tried to do is say, this isn't the kind of paper we would have written, not by a long shot. But let's see if we can constructively engage. Let's see if we can do precisely what you said, which is help Trump pull Netanyahu to a reasonable position? They've tried to engage constructively. Thus far, that has been rejected. I think this only gets off the ground if the American position starts to shift, which in turn pulls the Israeli position in a different direction.
So we come, I think, to the nub of all of this, which is how much pressure is Trump prepared to put on Netanyahu? And then how much is Netanyahu able to respond, given that he's got Smotrich and Ben-Gvir and the other extremists inside his cabinet?
Right, and deep inside his own political party, and that's what we're hearing. And what we're hearing from Netanyahu, coming out of that meeting with Trump, speaking in Hebrew to the Israeli media is, I win, we're staying in Gaza, full stop, there will not be a Palestinian state, that's done, it's over with, nothing to talk about here. The Americans have not called him out on that. Netanyahu has wiggle room should he want it. The opposition have offered him a safety net. Now, I want to be clear. That's not an opposition that supports a Palestinian state. That's not an opposition that's going to push for dignity or rights for the Palestinians. But all those political horizon things, I don't think are going to happen in the near term anyway, not unless Israel feels a different cost-benefit calculation, not unless its impunity is challenged. What could happen, what needs to happen, is the ceasefire. Let's be clear, this is an unserious plan. It's a highly problematic plan, but it's not going to bring peace to the Middle East, okay? But can it do the thing that is most urgently required? Stop the killing, stop the displacement, stop what's credibly referred to as a genocide. It can do that if Netanyahu feels, I've got nowhere else to go with the president. That's not where we're at now. Right now, Netanyahu returns to Israel from that meeting feeling he has the president where he wants him. But he knows the president is unpredictable. He knows also there are real divisions in the MAGA movement. A lot of people are saying, hey, this is supposed to be America first, not Israel first. Right now, Trump is not in a place where he's going to pull Netanyahu into a zone of agreement. That could change, but it will require pressure from Arab states, probably from Europeans as well, to make that change. I'm not seeing that happen enough, but hopefully that's what people will be focused on.
Daniel, what you say seems to me to be impeccable in terms of logic and deeply, deeply depressing. Do you see any shards of light in any of this at all?
You know what? I do. And I wish I could tell you that they are surmounting the shards of darkness. They are not. But I do see shards of light. I do see the beginnings of a sense among more Israelis, not enough, but among more Israelis, that something has gone fundamentally wrong here. That you can't forever ignore the truth of what is going on in Gaza. That's something that one could tap into. I see the shift in public opinion, Andrew. And I think what we're seeing is the timelines were all wrong, right? The timeline of destruction moves relentlessly fast. The timeline of changing policy, which might lead Israel to see it's got a problem, moves way too slow. But that's the shift in the zeitgeist. What we saw at the Labour Party conference earlier this week, the leadership desperately wanted to say, hey, let's applaud recognition and not do anything else. The membership said, no, we want to acknowledge genocide and impose sanctions. Yeah. And that is going on elsewhere. What's happening with Israel in sport, in Eurovision. I don't love these things, but this is what could grab the attention of the Israeli public and lead to a shift. What we see with these flotillas, and with some countries saying we're going to offer you some protection with our boats, it's that shift in opinion, even in America, which could lead to a shift in policy and a new reality.
That is so important. We will keep watching it very, very carefully. For now, Daniel Levy, thank you so much.
Thank you, Andrew.
Mohammed Zahid, a 65-year-old stallholder known locally as Boss Man in Rochdale, was among 7 men given long-term sentences for their involvement in the Rochdale grooming gangs, although frankly we should probably be calling them rape gangs. Let's talk to LBC's reporter Liam Gotting. Liam, just talk us through this horrific story.
Well, Andrew, the court heard how Mohammed Zahid gave these two girls free underwear from his market stall in Rochdale, expecting regular sex for him and his friends in return. The girls were sexually exploited from the age of 13 in filthy flats, car parks, alleyways and disused warehouses around Rochdale, referred to as Girl A and Girl B. The court heard how they were treated as sex slaves and expected to have sex with these men whenever and wherever they wanted it. Both girls, who were not known to each other, had deeply troubled home lives and were plied with drugs, alcohol and cigarettes. The judge described the two victims as highly vulnerable girls who were abused, degraded and discarded. While sentencing Zahid, the judge said he led a campaign of rape, showing chilling disregard for his victims and a lack of humanity. He said it must have been a truly terrifying ordeal for the two girls, and Zahid simply didn't care. He was given the largest sentencing out of all the members of this grooming gang. He was given 35 years in prison. In total, 7 men were sentenced to a combined total of 174 years in prison. There was no reaction in the dock from any of the men as they were sentenced. Concluding, the judge paid tribute to the two victims, one of which was in court to see the sentencing today, praising their courage to come forward and help put these 7 men behind bars.
A story that has been haunting the entire nation. Liam Gotting there, thank you very much indeed. Now, one unexpected announcement at the Labour conference I think we need to know more about was the Prime Minister on the arrival of a new online national health service, something or other. I say something or other because he said it was a new chapter in the story of our NHS, and yet we already have an NHS app. I've got one on my phone. So what does it mean? Let's talk now to Dr. Simon Ofer, who's Labour MP for Stroud and an NHS GP. Dr. Ofer, thank you very much for joining me again. Do you understand what this new thing is?
Well, yeah. Well, basically, I think what we're trying to do is get a much more enabled digital access to the NHS, and this is what this is leading to. And I think there's a number of building blocks we need to put in place. As you say, about 38 million people have the NHS app now, and it already you can access your GP records. You can look at your results. This is about communicating much more closely with the hospital, I think.
Right, yes. So my NHS app has just told me I need my flu jab, for instance. It kind of heckles me and reminds me, and I get my pills and I get my appointments through it. But it seemed to me the Prime Minister was talking about a new NHS trust, and it implied that I would get sort of online discussions, conversations with GPs through this. In other words, I won't go to the GP surgery for my consultation. I'll do it on the app. Is that what you understand? Because if that's true, there's lots of obvious questions.
Well, I think in the end, this is what we're building towards. So we need to build towards a much more 21st century NHS. And, we do a lot of stuff on our phones now, don't we? We book trains, we buy stuff and that sort of thing. Whereas actually the NHS, I think, is just lagging behind where we are as a nation. Yeah. That's how I see it. Is an enabled form of communication, etc. Now, GPs, as you say, have already got some online access, certainly. And so this will enhance that, I think, as well with the hospital. That's the specific extra step here, I think.
So it would be my GP that I would be engaging. It wouldn't just be another group of GPs working for another new NHS trust, because, I want to be prodded in the flesh and stared at in the flesh and have all my weird idiosyncrasies understood by the person I talk to. I don't want it just to be somebody I don't know on a screen.
Yeah, so I think, we need to be clear here. There's lots of different things going on in terms of digital access, and it's really, it's a real mission of changing our health service that we do this. Now, one of the things what you're talking about, I think, is accessing the GP, and from today, GPs are required by their contract to have online access from 8 till 6:30. So that's something that they brought in. Well, from the 1st of October. But I think the problem here actually is that some practices and indeed some hospitals just aren't ready for this. So we need to build towards it a little bit more slowly. But no, I agree. I think that the other thing we're trying to do is enable the sort of the comeback of the family doctor. So I would hope, Andrew, you would be able to see someone that you actually knew on the screen. And I'm sure you're a very busy man. And I think this enables you to access healthcare in a much more convenient way.
So it would mean as well that for hard-pressed GP surgeries, a lot of the, as it were, time-wasting, endless appointments would go away and they'd be able to get through their lists faster.
Well, that's what we're hoping. And I think that some people come and see me with things which actually they could probably just email me about and we can sort out. There's some fear amongst GPs that this is going to open the floodgates of sort of unmet need and demand. And certainly there's some concern about opening up too much in this way. But I think, as Wes Streeting says, it's time that we did move forward in this way and enable patients to sort of access us in a much more convenient fashion.
Dr. Simon Ofer, GP and Labour MP. I feel both a little bit reassured and certainly much better informed after that. Thank you so much. Now then, coming up, the relentless chaos under the Trump administration goes on as the entire US federal government shuts down. Find out why next. Time now, 6:49.
Coming up at 7 on LBC, Ian Dale.
If Hamas says no to the Gaza peace plan, Donald Trump predicts what he calls a sad end for Hamas. So if they do turn it down, what happens next?
Ian Dale on LBC.
Over.
Leading Britain's conversation, LBC, tonight with Andrew Marr.
6:50. So, if it occasionally occurs to you that the British political system isn't everything it ought to be, look west, my friends, across the Atlantic, where in the second time in 7 years, the entire US government has shut down, threatening hundreds of thousands of jobs and bringing a lot of government functions to a juddering halt. Why? Let's talk to Wendy Edelberg, who was an economic advisor to both George W. Bush and Barack Obama and is now a senior fellow at the Brookings Institute. Wendy, thank you very much indeed for joining LBC tonight. Now, without going into the details, can we first explain that this is a clash in the Senate between the Democrats and the Republicans, which means they can't pass the relevant bill?
So I think it's broader than that. I think it's across all of Congress. In order to get appropriations bills passed in the United States, you essentially need some negotiation, some successful negotiation between Republicans and Democrats. And that, it shows no chance of happening in the current environment.
And that means, question mark, the government doesn't have any money, and therefore, question mark, it can't employ people to do the things it normally does, and around 750,000 jobs are involved here?
Yeah, so the numbers are a little unclear, whether it's as high as that or as low as 550,000. But indeed, these people aren't fired. these people are furloughed. And in fact, legislation that was passed by Congress in 2019 requires that when the government reopens, all of those people who were furloughed, sent home, told not to work, when they come back to the agencies, they're actually given all of their back pay. So, it's just nothing but an unproductive waste of resources.
And yet there has been a hint, at least, from Donald Trump that he would actually strip away some jobs and fire people this time.
Yeah, so the legality of that is pretty questionable. But yes, President Trump, I think he'd have to work with agencies heads, has threatened to use this opportunity to lay off those furloughed workers. Not clear exactly how that would play out. And if they followed at least some of the rules, that would mean that those laid off workers got a 60-day notice period, which would mean that they too would get back pay during the shutdown, because presumably the shutdown will not last 60 days. And when the government is reopened, they too will get all of the back pay for the period where they were, experiencing their 60-day notice period.
And Wendy, for people listening in the UK here, just explain to us the range of government offices and services that have now closed.
Yeah, so in the United States, this is how many people basically engage with the federal government. This is the Environmental Protection Agency, it's EPA, it's NASA, it's the Department of Congress, it's the Department of Labor, it's the Department of Education.
Wow.
So it's, a lot of the ways that people see this in past shutdowns is, for example, the national parks in the United States typically don't operate during shutdown. So you go to the national park and it's closed. Now that said, there are a lot of essential functions that are done by these agencies that will continue to operate, even though they don't have funding, even though those workers are working without getting timely paychecks.
Okay.
So for example, TSA will continue operating, the military will continue operating.
Yeah, so it's not quite anarchy in the US, but it's a really, really difficult position. Thank you very much indeed, Wendy Edelberg, for that. Much appreciated. Now, there's a new actress in Hollywood causing some kind of controversies among big stars like Emily Blunt and Whoopi Goldberg. Tilly Norwood, she is charming. She loves spending time in London cafes, and she is entirely AI generated. Is this the latest in the creeping tech takeover of the entertainment industry? Let's talk now to Anna Smith, former chair of the London Film Critics Circle and host of the Girls on Film podcast. Anna, Tilly has her own Instagram accounts. She's about, we read, to get her own agency. She is in every respect, down to the tears and the self-pity, like any other actress.
Well, I wouldn't agree with that, of course, but I think it's very interesting. It's a great publicity stunt, is what I'd say in the first instance. But I can also see why there has been a backlash, because, this was at the heart of some of the strikes that we had 2 years ago in Hollywood with the writers and the actors, is the danger of AI really, endangering people's work and also audiences' appreciation of the craft of acting.
Well, I have looked at Tilly on screen so much as I can, and she is very, very convincing. It's only sort of action movies and stuff that I've seen so far, but she is convincing. Now, I'm used to, and you are used to, seeing lots of AI-generated backdrops in films, ancient Rome or whatever it is. But the idea that you could have entirely AI-generated actors takes us to a new level. What does it mean for humankind, he said grandly, if we don't have human actors in films anymore?
Well, I think this has been in the works for a while, and the conversation is just getting louder, and it's going to be an inescapable option that's going to happen. But I think personally, as a big fan of dramatic performances and comedic performances, you cannot actually replace the humanity that a real person brings to that performance.
Couldn't agree more. The real problem for AI is bland and blandness.
Exactly. I think there's some mainstream movies will get away with this because it's simple storytelling. The audience isn't looking for that nuance. But for those of us that really appreciate the great craft of acting, I don't think it can be replaced.
Well, we all have slightly strange, slightly unusual, idiosyncratic faces, unlike Tilly, this AI actress. And that is the hope for going ahead. But let me ask you a little bit about the backlash, because proper, real, human, three-dimensional actors have been getting involved in this and sound very worried.
That's right. I mean, Emily Blunt was asked on a podcast how she felt about it, and I think she thought it was quite scary. I mean, understandably, Hollywood actors who've been asked about this have reacted negatively because it's not just their livelihoods at stake, it's a lot of people. One of the issues at the heart of this strike was background artists. We call them extras over here. If they're replaced by AI, these are people, they're not earning megabucks, they're just trying to earn a simple living. So it does affect the industry very much as a whole. Whoopi Goldberg said that she felt that people can still tell the difference between AI generated and real. I think that's true, but I think that may change at some point. And of course, we're very used to seeing CG generated actors, but those are also created by people. AI is different.
Absolutely. Is there any aspect of what we used to call Hollywood industry that isn't affected by AI? Because I know it's getting into writing, it's getting into producing, it's certainly getting into camera work, it's everywhere.
Pretty much. I mean, some of the sort of hands-on experience on a film set, as long as that will last, hopefully can't be replaced. I mean, but then you look at makeup artists, writers, everyone can be effective. Even visual effects artists are being impacted financially by the increased use of AI.
Well, if you see Tilly What's-Her-Face in a film or coming down the red carpet, don't go and see it, is my advice. Anna, thank you very much indeed for that. Now, if you've missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on both Global Player and the LBC app, where you can stay up to date with all the latest news and opinion, put your news categories in the order you'd like them, pause, rewind live radio, and listen to a range of podcasts. So download the official LBC app for free from your app store now. Coming up at 10 on LBC, it's Ben Kentish. But right now, it's time for Ian Dale.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Like you, we're leading with Gaza, but we're going to ask a slightly different question.
Hamas is either going to be doing it or not, and if it's not, it's going to be a very sad end.
Well, it seems the future of this 20-point peace plan is almost entirely dependent on Hamas's formal response. Initially, I thought that the signs were looking good, given all the surrounding Arab states supported it. But comments today make me wonder. A Hamas insider says they think it gives too much to the Israelis. If this